Good evening, everybody. I know almost everybody here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lori Ann Farrell. I'm the Dean of the School of Arts and Humanities at Claremont Graduate University, and I also am the director of the Kingsley and Kate Tufts Poetry Awards program. And I'd like to welcome you, yes! I'd like to welcome you this evening to the second evening of celebrations, a celebrative reading by the two winners of the Kingsley and Kate Tufts Poetry Awards, Torrin Greathouse and Divya Victor. But before they get to read, I want to tell you just a little bit about this award. This was established by Kate Tufts, who honored her husband Kingsley, who was a shipyard executive by day and wrote poetry at night. He was a true amateur in that sense of the word that's original. He loved poetry, and she loved him. They set up a very interesting poetry award, however. It actually honors a book of poetry by a poet in mid-career. That's the Kingsley Tufts Award. And a first book by a poet of genuine promise. Those are her words, and that's the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. What I think is important about that is that these are not capstone awards. These are awards that expect more poetry from our poets. This is an award and awards that actually invest in the future of poetry. And so tonight we also honor 30 years of that benefaction. This is our 30th anniversary. Yes. Many of you have heard me talk about Kate before and about this with these particular details, but I'd like to say them again because there's something I love about her practicality. What she said was, I'd like to see poets have a little money so they could actually buy groceries. I'd like to see poets pay the bills. Everybody who just laughed in this audience is a poet. So Kate's other great saying was, let poetry and poets flourish, and we take that as our motto at Claremont Graduate University and with the Tufts Poetry Awards. Now, how do we accomplish the work that Kate actually gave so generously and asked us to do? We invite some great poets to be both judges and screeners, and we receive usually over 400 books a year. And our screeners this year, who went through all 400 plus, were Doug Manuel, Alexandra Umlas, and Lois P. Jones, all local poets from this LA area. This is for all three of them, actually, their third or fourth time being screeners. They like reading 400 books of poetry, and we love them for it. So after that, they actually choose a long list of books that they then send to the finals judges. I think we start with about 20, and we end up with 5, and then we end up with 2. Our judges for this year's awards are Patricia Smith, from whom you'll hear later, who's our chair, Pragita Sharma, Lynn Thompson, Carmen Jimenez, and Diane Coy Nguyen. Several of them have won Kingsley or Kate Tufts Poetry Awards before. They are all award-winning poets of absolute and unending promise. Now, this is our first year back after 2 years doing this by remote, and that's what I want to hear the loudest cheer for. It is so good to see you all. It is so good to be in a room with poetry. And this is after 2 years of award ceremonies on Zoom, weeks in residence on Zoom, and call the winner dinners on Zoom. I can tell you that's not very delicious. Zoom is immediacy electronically personified, but it is very satisfactory to be back in person and to meet our winners from recent, more distant pandemic years. So actually, to begin, I'd like us to welcome Tiana Clarke, who's the Kate Tufts Discovery winner of 2020. She was not allowed to come to LA to get her award 2 years ago, so we invited her back this year, and she's going to be joining me at the podium in a moment. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Tiana Clarke is the author of the poetry collection, I Can't Talk About the Trees Without the Blood, which is the 2020 Kate Tufts Discovery Award from Claremont Graduate University. She's a 2019 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellow and the 2015 Rattle Poetry Prize. She is the recipient of the 2021-22 Amy Lowell Poetry Traveling Scholarship, and if you come to our reception afterwards, please ask her all the places where she is going. And she's a winner of the 2019 Pushcart Prize. Tiana is the 2017-18 J.C. and Ruth Hall's Poetry Fellow. She was at the Wisconsin Institute of Creative Writing. And she is the recipient of scholarships and fellowships to Breadloaf, to Sewanee Writers Conference, and Kenyon Review Writers Workshop. Of all of these, marvelous and justly marvelous awards, she tells me, of course, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award is the best. Tiana is a graduate of Vanderbilt University and Tennessee State University, where she studied Africana and Women's Studies. And she is the Grace Hazard Conkling writer in residence at Smith College before she takes off on her travels. Tiana will share some poetry with us, and then she will introduce this year's Kate Tufts Discovery Award winner for 2022, Torrin A. Greathouse. Please join me in welcoming Tiana Clarke.
Thank you so much, Lorianne. I'm so excited to be here. Good evening. I'm just going to share one poem, and then I'm so excited to introduce Torrin A. Greathouse. My therapist wants to know about my relationship to work. I hustle upstream, I grasp, I grind, I control and panic, poke balloons in my chest, always popping there. Always my thoughts thump, thump. I snooze, wake and go boom. All day like this, I short my breath. I scroll and scroll. I see what you wrote. I like, I heart. My thumbs so tired, my head bent down, but not in prayer, heavy from the looking. I see your face, your phone-lit faces. I tap your food 2 times for more hearts. I retweet. I email yes, yes, yes. Then I cry and need to say no, no, no. Why does it take so long to reply? I FOMO and shout. I read. I never enough. New book, new post, new ping, a new tab, then another. Papers on the floor, scattered and stacked. So many journals, unbroken white spines, waiting. Did you hear that new? I start to text back. Ellipsis, then I forget. I bulk. I lazy the bed. I wallow when I write. I truth when I lie. I throw a book when a poem undoes me. I underline Clifton. Today we are possible. I start from image. I begin with Phyllis Wheatley. I begin with Phyllis Wheatley. I begin with Phyllis Wheatley reaching for coal. I start with a napkin, receipt, or my hand. I muscle the memory. I fail, hit delete, scratch out one more line. I sonnet, then break form. I make tea, use 2 bags. Rooibos again. I bathe now. Epsom salt, no books or phone, just water and the sound of water filling glory be my buoyant body, bowl of me. Yes, lavender, more bubbles and bath bomb, of course, some candles too. All alone with Coltrane, my favorite, Naima. For his wife, now for me. Inside my own womb, again, I child back, I float, I sing, I simple and humble. Eyes close, I low my voice. Was it a psalm? Don't know, but I stopped. Thank you. So the first poem I ever read from the incredible and astonishing Torrin A. Greathouse was Medusa with the Head of Perseus, and I was completely undone. And the poem that I just read, I just talked about when I read a book, I completely throw it across the room. If it does something that I also want to do, but I'm so astonished by it. But when I read Torrin's poem, it was on a computer, so I just wanted to throw my whole damn computer across the room. The way Greathouse spools and unspools myth, woven with fraught family histories, is a masterclass in and of itself, similar to the way I see Penelope weaving and untangling the funeral shroud in the Odyssey as an act to buy her time with these modes of death survival. In the poem, Greathouse writes, instead begin with the body, itself a kind of ending, a new mythology, the severance of 2 heads. This emphasis on the body and wound from the mouth of a wound is a brilliant living archive, a triumph to the way we need to investigate, reckon, and needle Greathouse's idea of body as a metaphor, as a rhetorical question, as erasure. The body, the broken body, the howling body, the body in doctor's office, the body in bedrooms, the body on display as science and under threat. The body as a brilliant and devastating entry point into this phenomenal book. I always say that poems are bodies that remind us of our bodies. And as I heard Torrin read for the first time last night, my body was on the brink of poetic explosion. The way Greathouse carves figurative language with such precise fire, with stunning similes and mouth on the floor metaphors. In this way, she held my complete attention. I was overwhelmed and so honored to be in her luminous company. Greathouse reminds me from her work that there is no simple history. Thank you for your poetry and your presence, blooming something wild and brutal and tender inside of me. Congratulations on winning the Kate Tufts Discovery Award. You 1000% deserve it. And the judges and the screeners were absolutely right. And so I'm so excited to intro you for your reading tonight.
Hi, y'all. Tiana, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm admittedly a little bit at a loss for words. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about Tiana. I love the poem that you read so much, and it holds a special place in my heart. Because the first time I got a poem in Poetry Magazine, it was the same issue as that poem. And I remember thinking to myself, holy shit, I'm in poetry at the same time as Tiana Clarke? And so now getting to be here at the same time as you, it's truly an honor. Going to start a timer for myself so I don't just ramble forever. And I will begin with the first poem in the book. Medusa with the head of Perseus, fiberglass reinforced resin, Luciano Garbati, 2008. 1. I do not want to speak about the beginning of this story. Were my scalp a wreath or crown of mouths still, I would not open, but you already know the myth. Rape that made the body punishment for itself, too. Instead, begin with the body, itself a kind of ending, a new mythology, the severance of two heads, where her thighs meet, no gash, sex mouthed into injury, no coiled viper against her groin, instead, a pale gap in stone's imagination. A dream my body swallows each pill, a small cut, a slow beheading. 3. My mother says her first crime was beauty, that my father's was how he imagined himself. A god called me blood curse, fair hair shriveled and sprouting teeth stain across a temple floor. Do not make me tell this story without a forked tongue. Before me there was a mother and a god, I mean a man and a choice. Imagine her body, a home, call my father, burglar, my birth, a breaking and entering. At least this crime gives a name to the shatter, invents a reason for the curse birthed into this body. 4. Oh, serpent-headed girl, mirror that statues its reflection. I blink, and all the stonework shatters. I sweep a sea of mirrors into my palm, and suddenly I am wearing my mother's face, all these failed children sharpened into my skin. The bathroom, a flood of tiny cardinals, cells that divide and twine a scarlet thread slithering down my wrist. 5. My family is the myth of an animal devouring itself. What is an Ouroboros but a body, or a story without a beginning or an end? Medusa braids her fingers through her ending soft brown hair and takes off his head. A story swallows its first words, forgets where it's going. Am I the serpent? My mother disowns me, and suddenly I am a folk tale. Am I the serpent-headed girl, or her endless reflection, or the winged mare burst forth from her blood? Child of slaughter, wound from the mouth of a wound, 6. I drag the thread of scarlet feathers from my palm and watch my body's unbraiding. How a gene, when pulled, unravels a child, my DNA, a two-tailed snake swallowing my father's face. I see Perseus's head dangling from Medusa's hand, and no transition like this. To hold a violent man's face in your hands, to set him and his blood aside. This next poem immediately follows it and is part of a pair from within the manuscript. They were actually written at a venue that holds a deep love in my heart, the Cantab Lounge in Boston. You will see Patricia Smith is also someone who comes out of that scene. It's fantastic. So this is a persona poem from the point of view of my own blood. Phlebotomy as told by the blood. Consider these parallel histories. An emperor once declared war on the sea, sent his men drowning toward victory, and the Red Sea is named for the dead, algae blooming within it. Can you tell me the difference? Maybe I too am red for all the slaughter carried within me, bastard child of water, lakes swelled with rotting fish. What are you searching for when you drag me from you? Your vein, a riverbed dredged of impossible children, cells tested for the echo of your mother's name. Once you were carried in your mother, her belly a lake. If the child before you and all those after sunk, are you the blood or the water? A boat or the first unfinished wolf wrenching itself from the sea? A bridge, 2 carries bodies, and the water carries it. Does this make the bridge a mother or a child? Your mother once told you that if she gave you life, she could take it back. Does this make her the bridge or its necklace of nooses? A river or its surface tension? Liquor is lighter than water, and so is gasoline. Both burn, both stained glass surface in the sun. Common language says we drown in liquor. Perhaps this means your mother is a lake beneath another's surface. What does that make me? A bridge or a glass? Your mother's mother? Sometimes I worry that you've forgotten me, dry and sober as a boat, your survival, a matter of surface tension. Maybe you believe that you are the bridge, suspended above all your dead. Don't forget, everything erodes. A canyon is just a river's bastard child, bruised deep in the dirt. All of man's inventions topple. Each bridge's arches bullied down to cliche rust. Another history blooming the water red. This next poem is in a form I invented in the writing of this book. It's called a burning haibun. So a traditional haibun is a Japanese haikai form. It is a chunk of prose with a capstone haiku, and typically are written as travelogues or observations on the outside world. The burning haibon, and you can kind of see here, adds a stage of erasure, erasing itself and then erasing itself again into a haiku, and are meant to be written about an internal landscape, a looking inwards. This is the first one. Burning haibon. Once, my mother accused me of throwing alcohol and gasoline on my emotions. Once, my father's breath was a guilty verdict. His car curved inward like a palm, how it birthed him back as a fist, and I became the bloody rise of crescent moons hidden inside. I skin my knuckles and smell the alcohol before it enters the wound. Yesterday, I read that cleaning a cut with this clear burn will worsen the scar, make the undamaged cells forget how to rebuild. Maybe each scar is the skin's blackout, each blackout erasure down to the cell. Once, my father tried to collision a child into perfect. Once, I tried to drink myself into blackout or erasure myself into something more poem than memory. Since the birth of words, we have languaged our history into burnable things, papyrus, paper, plastic film. Once, I bought a box of cassettes just to watch their innards burn, flashpoint from wound to wound. Once, the cops accused me of my lineage, my blood, a guilty verdict. Each breath, my father's, how we first called delirium tremens, the blue devils, alcohol, possessing the body, how each drink curls me into a tighter fist, and this too is not mine. Or if I claim innocence, each bruised wall, each jaundiced dawn without midnight before it becomes a guilty verdict. My mother marries an alcoholic and gives birth to kindling. This is to say, my father calls his child a faggot and watches them burn. Did I inherit this addiction from my father or the queer of my blood? Once I swallowed liquor like guilt and named this family. Once my mother accused me of my father's breath, his fist hidden inside. I smell the alcohol, forget how to rebuild each blackout, erasure down to birth of burnable things. Once I just watched the wound accuse me of my blood, my father's possessing the body, how each drink too is not mine, or I claim guilt. My mother gives birth to his child, a faggot, and I inherit this queer of my blood I swallow and name family. Father, hidden in erasure of me, each drink mine, my faggot blood. I think I'm going to read some poems from the back of this book that I don't often read. The last section of this book deals heavily with the death of trans people in this country. This poem contains within it a falsehood because at the time I wrote it, the trans panic defense, a legal defense wherein if someone murders a trans person, they can blame that murder on temporary insanity as the result of discovering that that person was trans. At the time I wrote this poem, that was a legal defense allowed in all states but 2. Now it is allowed in far less. One of those is Texas. At the time this poem was written, it was a valid defense in the state of Texas. When my brother makes a joke about trans panic, it will record, scratch, replay in my mind that he frames this like advice, this joke, a gutting, a taxidermy of my fear. When I tell him I am afraid to live in Texas, and he laughs, tells me, you have nothing to be afraid of so long as you don't lie about being a woman. And this is the truth. Alchemy of my body becoming first deception, then a heinous crime, and then I remember The Texas still carries the death penalty like a proud flag. So my death becomes a kind of execution, punishment to match the crime of transformation. I wonder what the method will be. Skull cracked against a wall, throat wrapped in a necklace of rope beaten until my body is no longer my own. Another kind of transformation, my drowned face floating in the toilet's stale water. I can't see this as just a joke. Not from the boy who still calls me brother, who would read my obituary out loud and still hear a punchline. The poem that immediately follows this, and if the context isn't immediately apparent, these poems are prescient to me right now because of the legal attacks across this country against the existence of trans people. I never want to write timely poems, and these poems continue to be timely, which is a horrible thing. This year so far, a trans person has been murdered in the US approximately every 8 days. The majority of those are trans women. The majority are trans women of color. This poem is after Ilya Kaminsky. The body of a girl lies on the asphalt like the body of a girl. And this does not bear comparison. The body of a girl lies on the asphalt, and it is not like the splayed anatomy of broken fruit. Is not like a gaped wide mouth throat, a stoppered bottle, is not like the mystery of birdless feathers, or the dull-eyed glint of a wishing well gone suddenly dry, down payments on possibility parching in the sun, is not like a bent hammered nail, or snapped bow, or the silence after a question's heft. The body of a girl lies on the asphalt like only the body of a girl, and someone will still name her a man. No. Perhaps the body of a girl lies on the asphalt like a daughter. Yes, just like that. I don't write many happy poems. And a lot of people probably wouldn't call this a happy poem. But I think in its own way, it's one of the most joyful poems in this book. An ugly poem. Once, I searched for softness on my tongue, ground my father's anger, sour mash cavities for my teeth. I just wanted to talk pretty enough to be mistaken for what I was. Hot flush of girlish blood, I edited all my ugly out, made a perfect poem of my soft and lacquered mouth. Now, I'm looking for the ugly of my tongue, lolling serpent curled in the slick of my jaw, searching for its own teeth. I'm a noisy bitch, all bark, snap, growl. My voice still heavy with boy ghost, cotton mouth and gunpowder. My Eve's apple, the flint to my blunderbuss throat. I'm all buck teeth and ulcer, enamel, a stained glass of nicotine and lip gloss. The broke back Madonna, arms tucked around all the empty air. I could imagine a child, wombless Mary. Patron saint of the ingrown hair, the bed sore and 3-day eyeliner revival, I rise, a slutty messiah from the 6-day depression sweat and the good fuck that ends it. I'm a one-girl Armageddon, nails, cracked, polish, chipped, walk, crooked, call me freakish, DeMilo. My body too, a crumbling goddess. Stone cold, this body, holy trickster, sacred punchline sometimes. A strange man calls me bitch when I will not shift for the big dick of his stride, and this is a conjuring, a spell, a blessing sometimes, y'all. It's the most woman I feel all day. I think I'm gonna read 2 more poems for y'all. One, I'll read this one and then one shorter one. Maybe, hold on. Nope, okay, I'll read a different one. All right, so this is one I don't think I've ever read at a reading for this book. Another poem written in the Cantab Lounge and that owes its existence to a workshop by the incredible poet Ciara Freeman. Before the not child's not howl, my lover comes inside me and I weep inconsolable, my body pressed almost through the sweat-drenched mattress, impotent as wax, fruit before a starving man. Outside the window, birds pulse into the air. Their wings become broken scissors, etching the clouds into confetti. Open a doorway to the sun's soft light, and the dark pit, it burns into my eyes. Thin slice of ginger root, apricot seed, a stomach's perfect swell. Every animal sound reminds me of a future child. Their ungentle howl, the babble of a baby's brook mouth. After my lover dries the sudden ocean from my cheeks, I search for beauty in the world as if it were new. Gather it in fistfuls, tongue the sunlight, teethe against the buttermilk moon. My half-sob syncopated like a heart not yet fully beating. I palm my narrow hips, imagine a dream passing through them like wind through the eye of a needle. Imagine a child against my chest, still born from inside me like a wave. Imagine my life without this inconvenient truth. A record rewound so far it begins with a new song, a choir of children, mouths curled into the shape of a grin, a chorus, a laugh of a mother's name. And then the last poem I'll read is an angry disabled poem. I hate, and I feel like this is especially prescient in California because it's more common here than anywhere else I've lived, the way that lame is used as a catch-all word that doesn't actually mean anything. That's so lame, he says, when the bus is late, when the TV show is canceled, when a fascist is elected, when the Wi-Fi's bad. That's so lame, I say, rubbernecking my own body in the bathroom mirror. See, every time lame comes out mouth it doesn't belong in, my cane hand itches, my bum knee cracks, my tongue's limp gets worse. Some days it's so bedridden in the bottom of my jaw it can't stand up for itself, fumbles a fuck you, trips over its own etymology, when all I want to ask is, why do you keep dragging my body into this? When I want to ask, do you know how this slur first feathered its way into language? By way of lame duck, whose own wings sever it from the flock and make it perfect prey? I want to ask, how long have you been naming us by our dead? Baby booked, you're broken from the textbooks of our anatomy. A car limped along the freeway, a child crippled by their mother's baleful stare. Before I could accept this body's fractures, I had to unlearn lame as the first breath of lament. I'm still learning not to let a stranger speak me into a funeral, elegy in orthodox slang. My dad used to tell me this old riddle. What value is there in a lame horse that cannot gallop, a bullet, and whatever a butcher can make of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Torrin. Next, I'd like to introduce another introducer, Patricia Smith, the chair of this year's Kingsley Tufts and Kate Tufts Awards judges. Patricia is the author of 8 books of poetry, including Incendiary Art, which was the winner of the 2018 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, the 2017 Los Angeles Times Book Prize, and the 2018 NAACP Image Award, and was a finalist for the 2018 Pulitzer Prize. She's also the author of Should Have Been Jimmy Savannah, winner of the Lenore Marshall Prize from the Academy of American Poets, Blood Dazzler, a National Book Award finalist, and Gotta Go, Gotta Flow, a collaboration with award-winning Chicago photographer Michael Abramson. Her other books include the poetry volumes Tea House of the Almighty, Close to Death, Big Town's Big Talk, Life According to Motown, the children's book Jana and the Kings, and The History of Africans in America, a companion book to the award-winning PBS series. Her work has appeared in Poetry, the Paris Review, the Baffler, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Tin House, and in Best American Poetry, Best American Essays, and Best American Mystery Stories. That's a good one. She co-edited the Golden Shovel Anthology, New Poems Honoring Gwendolyn Brooks, and edited the crime fiction anthology Staten Island Noir. She's a Guggenheim Fellow, a Civitalian, and I want to know what that is, a National Endowment for the Arts grant recipient. This is what happens when you pour one of those bios off the web. A finalist for the Neustadt Prize, a 2-time winner of the Pushcart Prize, a former fellow at both Yaddo and the MacDowell Colony, and a 4-time individual champion of the National Poetry Slam, the most successful poet in the competition's history. Patricia is also the Distinguished Professor for the City University of New York. And of all of these honors, she tells me that being a judge for the Kingsley and Kate Tufts Poetry Awards is the very best. And only second is the winning of the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Awards. So Patricia is many things, but she also knows how to introduce a fellow poet with lyrical and uncanny encomia. She will now introduce this year's winner of the Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award, Divya Victor. Please help me welcome Patricia Smith.
Torrin. Wow, you are absolutely amazing, and you're making me look at the world in a way that I never looked at it before. Everything just opened up another door, and another door, and another door. And as good as reading your book was, hearing you is so much better. It's amazing. A while ago, I was in Germany. Divya's going, what does that have to do with me? I was in Germany, and they had put a group of poets on a train, and they traveled throughout the German countryside, and they would get off every once in a while, and the town will have decorated, and kids would be out singing and dancing, and there'd be a gazebo, and the poets would get off, and they would read, and everyone would have this great day, and they'd get on, and they'd go to the next town. And so I was in Berlin when the train came home finally. And there were so many people crowding the platform that they had to shut the regular operations of the station down. They'd come to greet the poets, bring them home. They had placards with the poets' faces, lines of the poets' work. And when they opened the doors, they had to pass the poets out over their heads because so many people were happy to, and I'm sitting there going, what, where am I? And I think that's the difference between a place like where we live and a place that looks to the news for the news and to the poets for the truth. We are celebrating now, but sometimes don't you feel like in the midst of some celebration that you're holding a cardboard cutout of a smile in front of your face? This has been a very, very hard time. We are lost. We are broken. So many of us hate so many of us. And truth is all of a sudden in really short supply. And so finally, people have started to turn toward the poets and say, what are they doing? What are they saying? Can we find truth here? And truth is a really lonely place to be. I had the immense pleasure of sitting next to Divya yesterday and getting to know her in dribs and drabs. And then finally, I just went, oh yeah, me and you. I think that people who are struggling to tell the world right can recognize each other. And nowadays, more and more of those people are poets. I think what we have to remember is that we are charged with the telling of our own story. And if we don't tell it, we give someone else permission to do so. I am so thrilled to be able to recognize a woman who, for which truth means everything, whose phenomenal book, Curb, told a truth that so many of us either had chosen not to see, or that we'd chosen to run away from, or we said it's not part of our story, and so we're not going to look at it. And it's part of everyone's story. One of the things Divya said last night before she read was, this is not going to go well with dessert. And that was true. It didn't go well with dessert. And when she was done reading, I saw that a lot of people didn't know what to do. You know, sometimes there's this white-hot moment of silence, and the truth becomes so electric that it's not a time for applause, it's not a time for discussion. All you can do is sit there and absorb what has just happened, what's being told to you, and what this poet hopes that you walk away with. So for one of the most electric books that we looked at, and for a story that will absolutely refuse to die, I welcome the Kingsley Tufts Award winner this year for the phenomenal book Curb, and a book that it may be on list for a while, but it's going to be in minds forever. So, so, so happy to know you, darling. Divya Victor.
Patricia, I feel like you warmed me with your own blood. Thank you for that kithship in the introduction. Torrin, it's an honor to read with you. And good evening, everybody. The poet Gertrude Stein said, "I'm writing for myself and strangers. It is the only way I know how to do it." And tonight, I feel I am writing for strangers and myself and the people who are my friends in the audience, which is another way of being myself with others. The book Curb, I think in some ways, began to be written 21 years ago when I landed in this country after the September 11th attacks occurred, which was the first emergency that introduced me to the kind of citizen I could be and couldn't be in this country, and the moment that introduced me to the work of becoming a post-Patriot Act poet. And then the work in earnest began after the Trump administration was elected into power. That was the second emergency. And the third was the emergency C-section that gave us our daughter, Zamin, whose name means the earth, the very ground that I stand on. So today I will begin with her birth And the experience of giving birth to an American child in this Indian American body in Singapore. And we've heard of medicalized births, but I was becoming newly acquainted with the idea of a bureaucratic birth and the paperwork and the documents that narrated that birth even before it happened. And I began to wonder, can the sound and the music of my lullaby ever be louder than the language of bureaucracy that frames my child, that names her American, that names me foreign mother? Hedges. This has an epigraph by Michel Serres. Through the skin, the world and the body touch, defining their common border. Contingency means mutual touching, our common tangency. First, there was a sea, and then there was a knot of hair. First, there was a line, and then there was a story. How do the dead wait in this tunnel, this tomb of book and breast? Patient. 1. At the consulate, the line for birth certificates is the line for death certificates. Was the child born beyond a boundary? Was the boundary wrought in gunmetal and grain? When they pull her out, the trundle of my pelvis rattles, but doesn't give way. In the prattle of the operating theater, she arrives like a slap, backwards, fleeing the face, the palm indigo smarting with flight. Our shared border is a fist unfurling, a red flag, her, a thing pink, found in the maraud, taken as a peeler's, further and further from the fruit until plum descends to plum, until a sound long and lean turns into a kind of skin, her, a thing inked, fleeced by charter. Were the parents held by the law? FS 240, did they love in the same language? DS 1350. They first lift Serosa from Serosa, arouse all the roses, prick each thorn, hum sub rosa, a song known to someone born before you. Ari-ro, ari, 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 2. To pleach a tree, we take the dead stem and braid it to a living branch, until a hedge thickens, until the braids come undone and the schoolyard dusts black hair red, until at the hospital ward my cries command the clouds to the window, cumulus, alluvial, lunatic. Each breath quests a gust, counts to 5, makes a list for the names for God. Twin simoons strand us both at this tear where earth parts from earth. Zameen, our zikr, our partition, awaking to daylight assembly from one, many, e ovum, pluribus, us, strung on suture, a flag drying, saffron, and egg white and succulent on a clothesline. Aloe is an organ. Saffron is an ovary. Patient's water intact 48 hours later. They sweep the membrane of the water sack. They bring the sky broom to enter my stoop. They bring the blocks of ice. Yes, I feel that. They place them against my chest. Yes, I feel that. Yes, I feel that. Yes, I feel that. She's ready. Unfold the shroud. Staunch the incision and sign here. Ari-ro, ari, ari, ari. 3. Until I was 11, I slept inside my mother's passport. In that photograph, I wear the face which drank the wet moon's horns and all. I have the eyes of a deer crossing the Pacific. 2 stitches on a single stave. Stitch, stitch. This will form a good scar. This will be a ring of roses, a pocket full of passport poses. Do you have proof of identity? She is her mother's child, as I am my mother's child, and as she is her mother's. Ari-ro, ari, ari, ari-ro, ara-ro, ari, ari, ari-ro. Hang the towels, beat the rugs, skim the way, swaddle the archipelagos. We are coming home with the bundled papers. We have fledged ourselves over this line, paper cranes that we are in this bleach sky. This is the plot, as in we now have a story, as in I pricked it red where you and I meet on a grid of wet, as in I have made a notarized copy of all our feathers. So birth is a kind of threshold. And sometimes in South Asian households, thresholds are dressed in red dots, similar to red dots commonly seen on an Indian woman's forehead. And the dot is a symbol of the seed, the source of life. And this poem requires some context. February 22nd, 2017. Srinivas Kuchibhotla was shot in a bar in Olathe, Kansas, by Adam Purinton, a white supremacist who believed that Kuchibhotla was an illegal immigrant from Iran. The shooter yelled, "Get out of my country," before he shot and murdered Srinivas. Then, the shooter went to another local bar and bragged that he had shot an immigrant. And on that day, I was pregnant and moving into my 3rd trimester. And this poem documents the day in my body when I heard the news. I had been carrying her 6 months. Within me, she could open her eyes. She could tell dark apart from light. She could know when daylight filtered through the cathedral, a ray breaking the sticky pane, cranberry-stained glass womb. When I read the news of the shooting, this belly plumed into an apse. It distended upward, a balloon hollow but leaden, these lungs lifted here. This diaphragm fled, bore through a tent made of ligament and rope. The billow screeched in these ears, pulled here, these legs apart, these toes went numb and cold. The ground beneath me collapsed, turned into dunes, and the sand quickened. Here, this belly carrying those pounds of flesh began to take flight in seconds. It was in here, this mouth pressing against here, these teeth, a pear balloon, hot flush with wet wings beating, with wet wings thrashing in these lungs, the breath and ocean of blood. This skin here, a dam detonating, a pulse here pulling history towards these feet. When I read the news of the shooting, I was standing in our library, and this here face fell into 100 sheets, sheaves of visas lost in monsoon floods. A long queue dispersing after bad news passes through breath and beard, a susurrus of shaking heads, shrugged shoulders. This face fell apart in the quiet hum of the air conditioning, soft surplus lisping off me. The bones simply giving way, the skin curling back, the cartilage of this nose spilling a bib over this here pale nightshirt. But I needed this face to stay. I wanted this face to flee, to abandon me the way rats do ships, to stave off a starvation by drinking water, to make it to any shore, baby in mouth. I needed this face because it was on my visa. I gathered it up. These knuckles driftwood, these palms sailcloth, these fingertips branched apart, each phalange dangled. Cheap pens at the mall's Western Union, chained and paranoid about being taken elsewhere. The nails scratched the deck, and that sound drowned the sough of crowds migrating within one. When I read the news of the shooting, it was warm and bright outside. The cumin spun into russet, the curds set just right. I called my mother. It was dark and cold where the news stained first, where the choke cleared brushwood for a pyre, where she was. I called out to my husband. I thought about my father, but I did not call him. When I read the news of the shooting, the blowback was a flight from the fear of ever seeing a photograph of my father's rib shattered, his blood staining the pocket of his faded navy peak polo, the one he wears on Costco runs for bananas and 2 packs of Windex, was a flight towards the pale band of skin on his wrist where he keeps time, how he looks older, more lost when it isn't hidden by his watch. I pocketed this band for the arms I would offer myself as I begged in the months to come for a place on a curb not wet with blood, of a question not always cocked. I remembered my father's future as a passport photo hung from an elm tree, as a headline, as a statistic gently rolling on a marquee. That brown face, a stain between kin and ken, between breath and brotherhood on the floor near the boots of citizens, Americans, men. When I read the news of the shooting, these palms began speckling, small white patches bloomed and turned to face me, curds splotchy with pale pink mulberries stamped and dragged, red and unripe between skin and muscle. This body had crushed itself while reading the news. The she in me turned, faced herself. Cherry feet fluttered at the sweet-sop bladder. A migrant heartbeat clattered like a clay pigeon. The middle of our sky was pressed pause. When I read the news of the shooting, these ears rang the phone lines of the dead, called for the knowing trill, the scatter of sugar, of a spoon circling a milk tea for one on the other side of the world. When I read the news of the shooting, the she in me was swollen and pressing, and I saw her dropping to kneel, her brown belly collapse to a city's curb, her skull crimson in the clouds, a sweet ear flung and clinging to a parapet, and at that cleft, for the first time, I saw her as mine. And then, hearing cannons sung in double time, I knew being mine would clip her life, so I slipped this burning hand into a place where the body hammers at its heart, and I singed its edges, and with shame, I scorched a hole into the photograph of an ancestor, blotted her dark eyes out to whiteness, charred her skin to a pale ash, turned her folded hands into smoke, and I looked within this here belly for those eyes that could tell, dark apart from light, and I wished out loud so she could survive. Live, I said, in any skin, live. I swear that poem gets longer every time I read it. Zamin is now 5 years old, and that day is with me like it was yesterday. It was the day when I recognized her as mine, the first time. Since I was 11, many nation states have been trying to flatten me out into a stack of documents. And some of the earliest acts of collaboration I remember with my own family is the days where we would clear the dishes from the dining table after dinner and start filling out the paperwork for immigration. That, to me, was the early collaboration that I did with the three of us, my grandmother, my mom, and my dad. And one of the forms that we were exploring was the form, the Immigration Nationalization Services Form I-130, which is also called the Petition for Alien Relatives. And this is the form that you use if you are a US person and you're trying to bring family over so that you can just live with the people you love. And this is the last poem. It has 3 parts, and it tries to rewrite this particular form. And the epigraph comes from the special instructions from the form, and I think this really discloses how this country thinks about relationships. Please do not include graphic photos of childbirth or intimate relations as evidence of a relationship. I mean, kudos to the people who tried to send those. First petition. It is a Thursday, and no one out on this long street looks like your mother. So you go home, wrap yourself in Form I-130, knit a nest with a ballpoint pen, limn your ken inside a placeholder, smooth your limbs into a square to beg for a place for your first space, her. Write a name into the petition in thin, improbable syllables. No one calls her by that name in the elsewhere, because they know her fish market haggle, purse tucked at the waist, sari pleats pulsing like flushed gills. No one except the men who will ask her, ma'am, can you name 2 national holidays? And, ma'am, who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? So you plan it out. Letter by letter in letters, your mouth cupped to the cataracts. Ma, just listen and answer the men who ask how she came to know you, if she intends to remain here. And sir, for how long have you known that Ma was a bowl made for 2, brimming beyond any border, red as the arrival of her face 7 years later, a paper apparition drawn closer and closer to you by a queue unknotting at a frayed horizon in an airport, when it is a Thursday, and suddenly she walks through the passport photograph you once stapled at the edge of a petition to anchor her womb to your migrating heart. Second petition. The petitioning process is long, as is this poem. Second petition A. Use this form if you're a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the United States who needs to establish your relationship to an eligible relative who wishes to immigrate to the United States. Right here. Right here. If you know this place as home, about a beloved whose skin you cannot live without, whose fingers know why the jasmine bushes will not flourish in your backyard in El Sobrante, why your batter sours too late, why no amount of sugar will make your tea sweet, why your front yard is scattered with pinions, why all mail arrives like a bird strike to the fuselage, the dotterels dawdling and then shredding the turbines, whose letters you fold and unfold, fold and unfold, fold and unfold until the creases give way and you put the pieces back together on that dining table to make a map for a country made of vein and sinew, with hands pulled clean of wedding bands and raw rice, a map for a country of 2. B. If you need space to complete any section of this petition, use the space provided in Part 9. explain here, again, why they wish to leave behind the stone well where they first kissed you, where the large terrapin laps the shadow and circles around the mossy rock overhanging the clutch of her eggs, to circumnavigate a history of water trapped in land, where ankles graze against cotton skirts stamped again and again and again with laughing doves carved into wooden blocks, where an open suitcase is an undug grave, where a field of sugarcane is a bruise spreading purple through land owned by the IMF, a land free of flags, yet flagging, flagging, flagging. Third petition. I am filing this petition for select only one box. I am filing this petition for my spouse, select only one box. I am filing this petition for my parents, select only one box. I am filing this petition during the third shift at the mobile. I am filing this petition for her eyes and her tendency to leave jars open. That'll be 450. Have a good one. I'm filing a petition for her eyes and her tendency to leave jars open and the way a nape turning away from me. That'll be 1780. Have a good one. I am filing a petition for her eyes and her tendency to leave jars open and the way a nape turning away from me is a bride walking towards me, her hands veiled in a vermilion epic written with a crushed branch of, yep, you'll find it right next to the coffee. Yep, have a good one. I am filing a petition for her eyes and her tendency to leave jars open. And the way a nape turning away from me is a bride walking towards me, her hands veiled in a vermilion epic written with a crushed branch of henna, its flowers kept aside, each of the 4 sepals pointing in one cardinal direction, the lobes spread thin and patient, each red stamen paired and perched the petals ovate and leaning across the cliff of night into the gasp of the hungrier hours. During the third shift, you do not see her as I do, between the Haribo gummies and the sour cream ruffles. Fluorescent, arms akimbo, sweet burrow, sweetest sparrow. Last petition, or USCIS Form I-130, Spring Night Pastoral for all my alien relatives. Ma, remember when we waded into the form field and pulled pussy willow with inky palms, flicked buckeyes into checklist boxes, swung down on drop-down menus like banyan branches, cut terraces into the small print marshes, dragged yoked highlighters through, roved through the footnotes as you roamed unthreshed paddy and we, yes, I remember. We parceled our family into placeholders that September and huddled in the warmth of an archive set on fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Divya. Thank you, Torrin. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It is only left for me to tell you we still have hospitality and book signings, so if you would please join us. There is food and drink in the courtyard and a chance to talk to our poets and a chance to talk to each other. On behalf of Claremont Graduate University and the Kate and Kingsley Tufts Poetry Awards, I want to thank you for this evening, and I hope to see you here next year. Thank you and good night.